Hello. Ah, very good. Excellent. So a lifestyle of worship we've been thinking about, and not always easy. Last week I was stood at the back, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, and we were worshiping, and sometimes, we lift our hands, don't we? Sometimes we don't. And I was just stood there, and I saw a hand go up from along the front here. And it wasn't kind of up high, it was from a seated position. And I realized it was Anna. And, we've been talking about a God, and we've been singing about a God who looks into our heart. And I think there's something special when we can bring worship from a heart that is broken, is what came to mind. And, life is tough sometimes, isn't it? There's lots of stuff, actually, that can get in the way of my mind being focused on God all the time. I hope it's not just me when I lie awake at night and I'm trying to pray or go to sleep and stuff about work or this problem or that problem comes to mind. Someone give me a nod to let me know it's not just, okay, thank you. Phew. It was worth coming up here after all. And in the summer we were reading the Psalms, weren't we? And quite often in the Psalms, you would have the psalmist saying, oh, Lord, this is going on, and that's going on, and all these people are against me, and that's not right. Where are you, God? That's a psalm. That's a teaching on how to worship. And at the end of those psalms, invariably, the psalmist would say, but as for me, in the face of all this stuff, I will bless the Lord. And that's what I felt Anna was demonstrating there. In Psalm 103, it says, bless the Lord, all my soul, all that's within me. Come on, bless the Lord, stirring ourselves up to praise and to worship. And there's something else occurred to me. I remember someone saying this years ago, that, when we get to heaven, is there hurt in heaven? No. Is there sickness in heaven? Is there anger in heaven? Is there conflict in heaven? No, none of that stuff exists in heaven. So, here on earth, we have a unique opportunity that we won't have in heaven, in as much as we can bring a sacrifice of praise in the face of all the ugly stuff that's going on, that we won't be able to bring worship quite like that. I tell you, I'm looking forward to the worship in heaven, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a unique quality to earth-based heaven, if you like, because we're worshipping from lives that hurt sometimes. And I think there's a special blessing, what the Bible calls a sacrifice of praise. So in a sense, and shortly we're going to sing, now is the time to worship. Now really is the time to worship. There's a special blessing on worship that comes from that position and rises above the hurts that we face. David was very honest in the Psalms, wasn't he? And he was he was recognized as a kind of a fantastic worship leader, and God knew his heart. He loved his heart, a man after his own heart. And yet David was very vocal about all the stuff that he didn't like. But David was an expert at bringing a sacrifice of praise, and he demonstrated that sometimes praise costs, worship costs. And there's a famous story where he was looking for somewhere to build an altar, because the altar was a place of worship where they brought their sacrifices. And he found somewhere where he could build an altar on the threshing floor, and the owner didn't want to accept any money for David renting out this space, if you like, and said, no, it's right that there's a cost to this, and that I don't want to do this on the cheap. So I was thinking about the altar. And that was where they brought a sacrifice. And what they did was they laid down the lives of their livestock, which was probably the thing that they spent most of their time thinking about. A big part of their life was, where am I going to get my next meal from? They couldn't nip down to Tesco's and pick up a pack of 6 frozen, beef burgers, could they? So their life centered around making sure they had food coming. And they made a point of sacrificing that stuff that was important to kind of demonstrate how important actually God was to them. And I was thinking, well, what's the stuff that's important to us? Because, yeah, food is important to me, but I don't worry much about whether I'm going to get food or not. So what's the stuff that worries us? Maybe we should be bringing that to the Lord. And some things that I just jotted down. It could be hurts, it could be conflict, it could be work. It could be hurts and conflict in work. Often that's the case. It could be disappointment, it could be sickness, it could be tiredness, overwhelmed, exhausted, doubting, family, stuff.
One of them was worship, and the other was evangelism, and etc. Anyway, as I contemplated what I should do on my own, worship was the last one that I was going to choose, right? That was clear. There were one or two I was unsure about at the top, but certainly worship was not going to be the one I was going to do. So then I had a chat to Anne, my wife, and believe it or not, worship was top of her pile. So we had a reasonable discussion, and she decided that we'd go to the worship. Thank you, Anne. Right. But I'm thankful for it. She did sweeten the pill a little bit by saying that Gav and Kate were doing the worship group. And everyone loves Gav and Kate, don't they? So there we are. So it was it was definitely a sweetening of the pill. But it was a pill. And I actually said that the first night, I think, to the group tonight. I was quite open. I said, look, I've been a Christian 50 years, and I've never been, worship has never been something that I've really, really got on with, really. If that's the right thing. I mean, I remember when I was first saved, reading about, the sort of people who were worshipping at the throne, saying, glory to God and that sort of thing in Revelation. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not really sure that, that's a really engaging thing for me. I don't want to spend eternity sort of doing that. But then, of course, I read about the fiery lake of sulfur. And then it didn't, there was no choice then, was there? There was no sort of competition, really. Suddenly, sort of worshipping God before the throne looked a really good option. And so I thought, well, there must be something in this worship. And perhaps that's an allegory between the two things for people who worship and people who don't. So I've tried over the years to worship, and I'm not saying that I dislike singing all the songs, worship songs. I do, and some of them, like tonight, I've really sort of felt my heart lifted, and but other times I haven't. But it's never been a really big thing for me. So anyway, go into the group, and I should really thank Anne for this as well as all my friends in the group. It's raised my consciousness. I've become more and more aware that, they keep saying, our whole lives should be worshipping. Everything that we do, whether we're school teachers, whether we work in a factory, whether we are an accountant, whether we are a nurse, a doctor, whatever, that everything that we do in our daily lives as well, with our family, our kids, our grandchildren, should be like worshipping God, an opportunity to worship God. And that's come throughout the time together that we've been over these last few months, that everything should be about worshipping God. And because of that, I think it's raised my consciousness. So I've become much more aware of worship. And I've actually found a really good place, actually, because for the first time in my life, in the 50 years, I was saved in 1973, so it is 50 years this year, actually. Every morning, as soon as I'm conscious, which is usually about 8 o'clock, I start worshiping God deliberately. I thank God that for the new day. I open the curtains. That's just to annoy Anne, really, but because she's still in bed. I got a lovely view, and I thank God for the view. And I go downstairs, and there's a place now that I sit. I open the curtains, and I worship God deliberately there. And that's the first time in my entire life I've ever done that. So some of you have never really grasped hold of this worship thing. No matter how old you are, really, or how long you've been a Christian, there is opportunities there, I think, for us to So I'd like to encourage you to sort of consider how, and also the last few years, painting, that's the resurrection, well, it's Easter, the cross and the resurrection in one, really. So that helps me focus on God, and that's part of my worship. So, yeah, I found this place, and I think it has been really instrumental to be in the worship group, for me to find that much better place in terms of worship. So, again, thanks. There is one verse I'd like to read to you. It might not be for anyone, perhaps it was just for me, but I felt it was, a couple of times I've sort of walked away and thought, no, that's definitely for perhaps some people here tonight. And it's the last chapter of Revelation. I laugh because when I used to run the church group, every time we said, well, what book should we study next? Have a guess what they always said? Revelation, because everyone wants to understand Revelation. Let me give you a little tip, particularly the younger ones. If anyone ever tells you that they understand Revelation, right, walk away from them, because they don't, and they're just deluded, right? That's an absolute truth. No one understands Revelation, okay? And I certainly don't either, so you don't have to walk away from me. But there is at the very end, it says, John has just seen the city of God, he's just seen the tree of life and the river of life, and this angel has shown him all this stuff, incredible stuff. And he says, I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I had heard and seen them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who had been showing them to me. But he said to me, do not do it. I am a fellow servant with you and with your brothers, the prophets, and of all who keep the words of this book. Worship God. Worship God. Don't worship anything else. Worship God. And I think Kate alluded to it when you were talking about what else someone said to you. You know, you've got an audience of one. That's God. And we are here on earth to worship God. Thank you.
Well, funny enough, the worship group wasn't my first choice either. So I wanted to go to the social justice group. Apparently I was about 20 years too old. So I didn't really have any particularly strong feelings which other group I wanted to go to, but my husband Paul felt that he quite strongly wanted to go to the worship group because he very much feels that doing the sound is part of worship. So I was very happy to go along, and we used to see quite a bit of Gavin and Kate, and then we didn't so much through lockdown, so it was just a good opportunity to see a bit more of them as well. So, but actually, it's been brilliant, and I've actually, you know, it's been really, I don't know, it's been lovely to sort of explore together worship and what it means, and how we can worship God with our whole lives. So it's been a real blessing. Yeah, just want to thank Gavin and Kate really for bringing this all together, because they're doing a great job. So we've been concentrating, as you might have guessed by now, on this thing about our whole lives being worship, and this particular verse in Romans about giving our lives as living sacrifices, and that being worship. And so I was thinking, what does that mean, sacrifice? And of course, they used to do it a lot in the Old Testament, didn't they, to make amendments for sin and to give thanks and that. But this thing about sacrifice, it's about putting God first. It's about acknowledging that he is the most important, that he is, you know, over everything. And so, you know, in the New Testament, it's about we give ourselves as a sacrifice because we're acknowledging that he is Lord over us. So that's what it's all about, really. So I was thinking, what does that mean for me? And I'm thinking really that I spend most of my waking hours during the week at work. So for me, it's like, well, how can I worship God through my work. And sometimes we sort of think of work as a bad thing because, it takes us away perhaps from doing the nice things we want to do or God's work or whatever. But work was invented by God as part of creation. It didn't happen after the fall. It was part of creation. He gave the garden to Adam and Eve and told them to work in it. So work itself is not a bad thing. It got hard after the fall, and my phone's just gone off and I've lost my notes. It's almost like redeeming work by worshipping God through it, really, to what it should be. A lot of us spend a lot of our days in work. So what does that mean? So in Colossians, it talks about the motivation and why we do what we do, a little bit in Colossians 3. So it says, whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God, the Father, through him. And then later on in the passage, Paul's talking specifically to slaves, and he's saying, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything and do it, not only when their eye is upon you to carry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. So actually, no matter what my contract might say and what my employers might think, I don't work for them, I work for God. So for me, whatever I do during my work is not for those people, it's for God. So I need to do that in a way that honors and gives glory to God. So for me, that is making sure I do a really, really good job, even when I don't feel like it. It's showing patience and grace, and sometimes that's difficult. I think it's showing my staff that I value them, treating them with respect and giving them opportunities to develop. I think it's asking for God for guidance, because sometimes when you're competent at something, you can sort of forget, actually, and do things in your own strength. And I think, in the workplace, it's not just trying to do what you think is the right thing, but to always be seeking God and asking his guidance and how he wants, what is his will in that situation? How does he want you to behave? And you reflect, glory to him by behaving in a way that is godlike, isn't it? And acknowledging like he's in control even in the most difficult situations, a bit like Roger was talking about earlier on. And the sort of the benefit from that is not only actually, I think you actually get a lot more out of it yourself. The other thing I should have said is also sometimes standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult and it may affect your prospects or what people think of you. But the sort of the side benefits from this is, I think I get more out of it and I feel more fulfilled because I'm doing it for God and doing it in a way that I feel brings him glory. But also people notice that as well. And it actually, I think, gives me opportunities to speak to other people about God because I'm demonstrating him in my everyday life. So I think that's how I feel that I worship God through my work. Wouldn't say I'm perfect at it by any means, but I want to give God the glory in every single thing I do.
Thanks, Catherine. So thanks to Alan and thanks to Catherine. They're much more learned than I am, and Catherine, I'm sure, will testify that I tend to look at things quite simply and bring things in simple ways. So as we started this worship group, we set out to find out what is worship. What is worship? What is the formula? What is the secret? What is the way? And we've all brought slightly different things. I think there's a very common theme running through, and I don't want to keep repeating ourselves, but hopefully we're all bringing something slightly different to it. So we started looking at worship. What is worship? How do we do worship? What does God want from us in worship? And I look around our group, and we've got full-time teachers. We've got Joe, who works all sorts of weird and wonderful hours in a care home. We've got engineers. We've got Catherine, who's a very responsible job. Very responsible. I don't know how she finds time to think sometimes. And then we've got Alan and Anne, who, as you've heard, spend most of their time in bed by the sound of it. And you think, well, how can there be a formula? How can there be a way to worship that suits all of us, you know? My job enables me to work largely to my own timetable. I work a lot from home. I can take time out to worship, if that's what that means. But Gav and Kate, when they're in a classroom with kids all day, they can't take time out whenever it suits them. And I think in different ways, we all came to realize that worship isn't something we step away from our lives to do, because it can't work like that. You know, we all live such different lives that it can't work like that. Worship has to be our lives. Whatever our lives are and whatever we do in our lives, they have to be our worship. And as Catherine's pointed out, you know, whatever it is we do, whatever it is we're called to do, whatever gifts God has given us to use, we have to use those to worship him. And to focus on whatever it is we do it in a way that worships God. And that's what we're working out, and that's what we're trying to find out what that means for each one of us, because it does mean different things for each one of us. But it's all the worship that God wants us to bring. It's different, but it's the same. So Joe has put together for us a TikTok. I'm sure a third of the people in here know what a TikTok is. So she's put together a short video, a mixture of pictures and Bible verses and reflections. So we can just spend a couple of minutes just thinking about what we've heard, just reflecting on it. And yeah, just think about what does worship mean for each one of us. Thanks, Joe.
Rearranging destiny, I worship you, I worship you. You are here, touching every life. I I worship you. I worship you. I worship you, Lord.